There's a truth most people never notice. The most powerful person in the room is not the one who talks the loudest, nor the one standing under the spotlight. It's the one who doesn't need to speak at all. He enters quietly without seeking attention, yet the air shifts ever so slightly. You can feel it, the way conversations dim, eyes subtly follow, and people instinctively lower their voices. No one dares to ask what he's thinking. No one truly knows. That's the power of a man who has outgrown the hunger for recognition. A man who doesn't argue to prove he's right, who doesn't speak just to fill the silence. To win because in his world, the game ends before it begins. In a world obsessed with noise, the Machiavellian chooses silence like a sharpened blade. He doesn't act to be noticed. He acts with purpose. While others react in anger, he remains. Still eyes calculating, emotions unreadable. When they panic, he stands calm, unmoved, like a mirror flat lake before a storm. Is that calmness? Weakness? Absolutely not. Strength hidden in discipline, power under absolute control. Do you ever wonder what it would be like to be that person? It's the one who doesn't chase respect but commands it. The one whose presence causes discomfort, yet fascination. The person who never competes yet is always at the center of the game. If your answer is yes, stay with this video until the very end. You're about to uncover the Machiavellian rules that don't just teach you how to survive, they teach you how to dominate without ever raising your voice. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe, because what you're about to hear is what the truly powerful understand deeply, but never say aloud. In a world filled with chaos and endless competition, where everyone seems desperate to prove their worth, the loudest voices are often the weakest. The weak scream for attention. The insecure threaten and boast, hoping there. Noise will hide their fear, but the wise, they choose silence, not because they are afraid, but because they know the value of stillness. Silence, for a Machiavellian, is not absence. It's a strategy. They understand one simple truth. You don't need to prove you're strong. Others just need to feel it in your calm, in your composure, in your unshaken silence. Calmness isn't just emotional restraint, it's a weapon in the psychological battlefield. It causes your opponents to hesitate, to create stories in their own heads. They imagine threats that may not exist. They lose control before the fight even begins. The less you react, the more uncertain they become. And in that uncertainty, an illusion of dominance is born. The person who doesn't respond to attacks, who doesn't get pulled into petty emotional traps, who never needs to justify their presence, that person quietly takes control of the entire room. You don't need to win the argument, just let your silence confuse your opponent. You don't need to prove yourself. Just be there, calm, unreadable, like a question mark no one can solve. When you learn to master your reactions, you begin to influence the reactions of others. That is the true power of calmness. It's not passive, it's not weak. A silent, psychological form of domination. And that silence, that presence, is exactly where real power begins to take shape. Not through pressure, but through presence. So elusive, no one dares to challenge it. Because in every confrontation, the one who appears to be in control usually is. Why? Because perception is power. The moment you let your opponent speak first, you're already gaining the advantage. While they expose themselves, sharing their thoughts, their emotional triggers, their insecurities, you remain silent, unreadable. And that silence, it turns their words into weapons. Weapons they don't even realize they're handing to you. You don't interrupt. You observe. You let their need to dominate the conversation become their downfall. Every sentence they utter builds the trap they'll soon walk into without ever noticing. If you see value in these Machiavellian strategies, leave a like so I know you're watching, and don't forget to subscribe, because in the next chapters, we'll dive deeper into the art of manipulating space, time, and emotion. Techniques that don't rely on noise or brute force, but still manage to dominate everything in their path. Are you ready to move on to the next part? Here's a truth many power-hungry people never learn. They believe strength lies in changing. Others, they assume that if they speak loud enough, reason hard enough, push with enough willpower, they can reshape someone's beliefs or behavior. But that mindset is flawed. A true Machiavellian doesn't waste precious energy on changing people. He understands one unshakable truth: human nature is nearly untouchable. And when you try to change someone directly, you trigger their deepest defenses: emotion, ego, and the raw instinct for survival. So, instead of confronting human nature, the Machiavellian master bends the environment around it. He doesn't fight the current, he redirects the flow. This strategy is subtle, nearly invisible, but far more powerful than any verbal confrontation could ever be. Think of it like chess. You don't aim to destroy your opponent's pieces one by one. Instead, you move the board, quietly, deliberately. You reshape the space until every move they make leads to checkmate. You corner them, limit their options. Suddenly, every decision they make unknowingly furthers your plan. That is the highest form of manipulation, not aggression. Of the battlefield itself, you don't break your opponent, you change the rules of the game until they adapt. Unknowingly, on your terms. In business, this can be as subtle as adjusting deadlines, rerouting capital flow, or planting small seeds of doubt that weaken alliances. In personal relationships, it could mean vanishing at just the right moment, making them second-guess their own emotions, making you an unpredictable variable they can't categorize. You don't need to control their actions, you just control the stage where their actions unfold, the outcome. The same person who was once so confident suddenly stumbles. A strong-willed person weakens when isolated. A disciplined person wavers when their routines collapse. Even a powerful leader trembles when their support system dissolves quietly behind the scenes. Picture a wild animal placed inside a shifting maze. It's not physically weaker, but it's disoriented. It loses certainty. And in that mental fog, you gain the upper hand without ever touching them. Machiavelli calls this spatial control of conflict. You don't need to argue ... about right and wrong. You just need to create an environment where your victory becomes inevitable. And the strangest part is, if you build it carefully, they won't even realize what's happening. They'll believe they're making their own choices, staying in control, steering the wheel, till one day it hits them. Every path they could take only leads to one outcome: yours. Every exit was quietly closed long before they even thought about leaving. That's not a confrontation, that's architecture. It's the construction of a space where your opponent slowly suffocates, not by force, but by the subtle tightening of invisible strings. They move, they speak, they act, but only inside the boundaries you've designed. You don't need to beat them head in. It would be messy, loud, obvious. All you have to do is shape the environment around them so thoroughly that every step they take naturally leads to your desired result. The world bends without them seeing it. By the time they do, it's far too late. Remember, the greatest power doesn't lie in shouting commands or forcing obedience. It lies in making people shift their behavior on their own, all while believing it was their idea. True dominance doesn't need volume, it needs structure. Have you ever exhausted yourself trying to convince someone? Trying to argue, explain, or persuade? If so, stop. The solution isn't in changing people, it's in changing conditions. Alter the setting, reshape the game. 8. Rebuild the entire frame they operate in. Because once you control the stage, every actor can only perform within the script you've already written. Their words, their actions, their choices, all guided by the invisible hand you placed behind the curtain. If this part shifted how you think about power, leave a like to support the channel, and don't forget to subscribe. What comes next is even more subtle, and even more dangerous. We're about to step into one of Machiavelli's most deceptive strategies: pretending to be weak. Why? Because when your opponent thinks you're no longer a threat, that's when they leave the gates wide open. Are you ready? Most people believe that power comes from strength. Raw, visible, overwhelming strength. From shouting louder, from pushing harder, from winning directly. But that's the surface. It's what the crowd sees. Real power, the kind Machiavelli. Mastered often hides beneath the illusion of defeat. He understood something that most people miss. People don't guard themselves against weakness. They only fear what seems dangerous. Let that sink in. People drop their guard when they feel safe. They relax when they believe they've already won. And it's in that exact moment of comfort, when their hands are down and their minds are drifting, that the trap silently snaps shut. Take a look around. The most dangerous person in the room isn't the one throwing fists, the one who smiles while you celebrate too early. The one who retreats not in fear, but as part of a calculated design, because when you pretend to fall back, your opponent believes the battle is theirs. They start talking more, boasting, growing careless. And in that false sense of victory, they reveal the very truths they'd guard with their lives if they still felt threatened, their flaws, their fears, their real intentions. Machiavelli called this the art of baiting through deliberate helplessness. You don't resist. You allow them to believe there's nothing left to fight, no threat left to prepare for. And once they disarm themselves, you take control, not with noise, but from the shadows. But never confuse the act with the intention. Pretending to be weak doesn't mean you are weak. Pretending to lose doesn't mean you've surrendered. You don't retreat to escape. You retreat to lure them deeper. And when the time comes, you don't explode. You don't shout. You don't seek applause or vengeance. You strike quietly, precisely, exactly where it counts, irreversible. The wise do not chase applause or visible victories. They don't need the crowd to cheer, nor do they crave external validation. Instead, they seek something far more subtle: silence after destruction. That eerie calm that follows when the battle ends and no one even realized it began. Because when your opponent doesn't even understand what just happened, they can't defend themselves. And if they can't defend themselves, they can never fight back. That right there is the peak of manipulation, the summit of psychological warfare. The game is already over and they still think it hasn't started. Machiavelli once wrote, "The greatest ruler is one who knows how to be both lion and fox, strong enough to tear down empires, but cunning enough to hide his claws until the very last second." That's the balance. You don't need to roar to be feared. You don't need to shine to be seen. You don't need to stand out. You only need to appear harmless. Let them misjudge you. Let them lower their guard. Let them mistake your silence for softness. Because when they walk themselves into failure thinking they're safe, the trap doesn't need to snap, it simply closes. If you've ever been underestimated, dismissed, overlooked, don't argue, don't shout, don't waste your energy trying to prove them wrong with words. Let your silence do the speaking. Let it haunt them. Let it become their quiet nightmare. And when the time comes, when the moment has ripened and your plan has matured, strike. Not with emotion, but with finality. End it clean, cold, and complete. No second chances, no loose ends. No looking back. Because a person who is utterly destroyed, who has no path left to stand on, no piece of themselves left to recover, cannot seek revenge. That isn't cruelty. It's self-protection. In a world that often misreads kindness as weakness, it's a survival instinct. And if this part helped you realize that weakness, when used properly, can become a weapon, then leave a like to show your agreement, and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Because in the next part, we will uncover one of Machiavelli's most brutal principles: what to do when confrontation becomes unavoidable. When the battle is at your doorstep and you can't walk away, he believed that if you must fight, you must finish entirely. Absolutely. Because a wounded enemy is more dangerous than one already dead. Once a confrontation begins, there are only two clear choices: end it completely or prepare to suffer the consequences, possibly for the rest of your life. Half measures are illusions. They offer a brief sense of closure, but leave behind cracks wide enough for revenge to slip through. To a true Machiavellian, mercy without elimination is a strategic mistake. An unfinished enemy doesn't disappear. They adapt. They evolve. They come back more dangerous. Why? Because people don't forget humiliation. They don't forgive disgrace. A defeated opponent still breathes, still holds hope. Hope for revenge, hope to restore their image. But an opponent who has been finished decisively and silently has nothing left to return to. No path, no pride, no position. So don't confuse mercy with strength. Many believe offering an escape is a noble act, but Machiavelli knew every way out becomes a seed of future vengeance. Every unhealed wound turns into a mission. They won't forget. They'll wait. They'll gather allies. They'll spread doubt behind your back. And one day, when you're least prepared, they'll return, not for resolution, but for retribution. That's why if you must act, act as if you will never get another chance. Don't give them time to regroup. Don't let them send a final message. Don't leave them with their alliances intact. Don't allow them to keep even a shred of reputation, influence, or leverage that could be used against you later. In personal matters, this might mean cutting ties entirely. No messages, no explanations, no check-ins. In business or politics, it means full removal. They vanish from your strategy like they were never there. And once that decision is made, not just the opponent, but the entire system that empowers them, their resources, their allies, trust of others that protects and enables them, all of it must be dismantled. Not because of personal hatred, but because of strategy. If you leave even the smallest opening, the faintest crack, they will crawl back through it. And when they do, they won't return with logic or patience. They'll return with vengeance. Cold, calculated, personal. Once the conflict becomes emotional, you've already lost control. You're no longer playing chess. You're being pulled into a fire that burns without rules. That's the danger of unfinished wars. That's why every tie must be cut, every bridge must burn, and every advantage they once held must be neutralized. No support left. No reputation to lean on. No illusions of redemption. Machiavelli never glorified violence. He didn't teach destruction for the sake of destruction. What he understood and what most people ignore is a brutal truth. There is no enemy more dangerous than the one who once lost to you, because their pride is wounded, their memory is sharp, and they've had time to learn. So if you must end it completely. No grand gestures, no loud victories, just cold, quiet, irreversible finality. Leave behind only one message. One that never needs to be spoken aloud. I don't repeat myself. No insults, no spectacle, no drawn-out humiliation. Just disappear from their world. Erase yourself so thoroughly that it's as if they were never even worthy of being on the CHN wall. Same level. Because sometimes the most devastating punishment is to leave nothing behind. Nothing to respond to, nothing to fix, nothing to recover from, no apologies, no moral high ground, no closure. It's just a silence so deep, so absolute that it lingers. Like a shadow they can never escape. Kind of silence that doesn't fade with time, but grows heavier, more haunting. If you've ever let someone return and hurt you again, this is the lesson you must carve into your bones. An enemy still alive in your memory is an enemy with another chance to strike. The unfinished past is a doorway left open, and one day, someone will walk through it. If these words resonate with you, leave a like and support the channel, and subscribe, because what comes next is even more unsettling. We'll explore a strategy Machiavelli mastered better than anyone: the weaponization of silence. No need to speak, no need to strike, just remain silent. And let your enemy's own mind destroy itself from the inside out, because nothing terrifies the human mind more than silence without explanation. You can debate a sentence, you can block a blow, but silence, true sustained silence, offers no grip, no logic to counter, no intention to measure. It leaves only the unknown, and what fills that unknown? Imagination, fear, paranoia. People begin to build their own stories, invent their own theories, spiral into their own psychological traps. The less you say, the more they panic, and the less you react, the more they reveal. Silence becomes the architect of their downfall, and you never even had to lift a finger. Machiavelli understood this far before modern psychology could explain it. He knew the more you speak, the more you expose your emotions, your plans, your pressure points, but silence. It becomes a void they can't stop staring into. They begin to question, why isn't he responding? What is he thinking? Does he know? What will he do next? The silence doesn't calm them. It shatters them. And when fear grows in imagination, it becomes something far more powerful than any spoken threat. A rumor, when denied, can make you seem defensive. But when ignored, it becomes a riddle. Power, real power, lies in being a riddle no one can solve. Because when people can't predict you, they can't control you. Nothing disturbs the human mind more than not knowing what you're thinking. That uncertainty becomes a storm, not in the world, but in their head. They lose sleep. They replay every word you didn't say. They question their moves, doubt their own plans, begin to fear that your silence is the calm before something. Far more calculated, silence becomes a mirror. That mirror doesn't reflect you. It reflects their fears, their guilt, and their deepest insecurities. This is Machiavellian subtlety at its most refined. The art of defeating someone without lifting a hand, simply by allowing them to crumble under the weight of their own mind. Imagine looking into a mirror and not seeing your enemy, but seeing your own flaws staring back. That's the psychological battlefield where true power operates. You don't need to flex your strength. You don't even have to show your hand. All you need is for others to believe you're capable of something dangerous. Something they can't predict, and they'll back away. Not because of what you've done, but because of what they fear you might do. Because deep down, they're not afraid of you. They're afraid of their own impulses, their own inability to remain calm under pressure. When exposed to the uncertainty you've created, even the strongest enemy becomes fragile. An enemy can stand tall when they can see your moves, when your emotions give them clarity, when you react like anyone else. But when you vanish into silence, into a fog where they can't find you, can't read you, something shifts. They stop fighting you and start fighting their own thoughts. They search for reassurance. They stumble through the silence. In that search, they begin revealing parts of themselves they never meant to show. They start talking too much, overreacting, miscalculating. That is the moment you win, not by overpowering, not by arguing, but by doing absolutely nothing. That's the brilliance of silence. Silence isn't inaction. The precise tool, a weapon disguised as absence. It works not through force, but through psychological weight. Because when the words stop, the mind starts running wild. People second-guess themselves. They project fears, even blame themselves. Not because you said anything, but because you didn't. They start to think you're more powerful than you really are. And ironically, that makes it true. Power is perception, and perception thrives in mystery. As Machiavelli once noted, you don't need to make threats. You only need others to believe you might. Timely silence is not avoidance. It is dominance without conflict. It is the invisible hand shaping the battlefield without drawing a sword. When you withhold your response, you deny them the comfort of predictability, force them to react blindly, stumbling into traps you didn't even need to set. Let your silence echo in their mind like a whisper they can't escape. Let them interpret every glance, every pause, as part of some calculated master plan. When someone is too busy analyzing you, trying to predict your next move, they're no longer focused on protecting themselves. And that is where their defenses begin to unravel. If you've come to understand the power of silence not as escape, but as a form of control, then you're already on the path to psychological mastery. Leave a like if this idea speaks to you. And don't forget to subscribe, because in the next chapter, we will enter the highest. Master, leave a like to support this video and subscribe right now, because in the next chapter, we will uncover Machiavelli's final and most ruthless principle. If you must act, strike at the precise moment when your enemy is at their weakest, when resistance is impossible, and end everything in a single decisive blow. This is the essence of the perfect strike. You won't always be able to avoid confrontation. Some people, even after your silence and strategic withdrawal, will still try to cross the line, pushing boundaries. And at a certain point, action becomes necessary. But a true Machiavellian never acts out of emotion, not out of pride, anger, or impatience. He only strikes when the conditions are flawless to end the conflict once and for all, because a strike driven by emotion is always incomplete. It leaves gaps, weaknesses, openings in your defense. It wounds the enemy but does not eliminate them. And that, paradoxically, is the most dangerous mistake of all. A wounded enemy doesn't surrender quietly. Instead, they retreat, lick their wounds, remember every detail, and come back stronger. Next time. They don't waste words, they wait patiently for the perfect chance to retaliate. Machiavelli understood this deeply. A battle not ended decisively is only the beginning of a prolonged war. So, if you find yourself forced to act, be patient. Wait. Wait until your opponent is completely isolated. No allies, no influence, no resistance. Then, without noise or warning, you move not to vent anger, but to finish the fight. No recovery. No counterattack. No opportunity for your enemy to spin their story, rewrite history, or rally support. You don't need to strike with reckless violence. Instead, strip away their resources, sever every connection, erase the social position and power they once held. When everything collapses around them, disappear from the scene without explanation, without announcement, without looking back. That is the declaration of someone who does not crave praise only. Results that cannot be undone. The most perfect strike is the one you never have to repeat. If you've ever given someone a second chance, only to watch them return and strike you down again, then you already understand why Machiavelli never allowed even half a step of compromise in a moment of decision. Like this video if you've internalized this brutal but necessary lesson. And don't forget to subscribe, because in the final chapter, we won't talk about victory anymore. Instead, we'll talk about rebirth, the becoming of someone untouchable, who no longer reacts from emotion, but moves only from a silent inner force. After all the strategies, after the silence, the calculated withdrawals, and the precisely timed strikes, you begin to realize something deeper. True power doesn't lie in controlling others. It lies in mastering yourself when you no longer react to provocation, when you no longer speak just to be understood, when you no longer need to win every petty argument. This is not just a victory over others, it's a victory over yourself. You have stepped into the highest level of personal command. At this stage, no one can manipulate you anymore, simply because you no longer crave recognition or validation from outside sources. No one can control you when you have freed yourself from the fear of losing anything. That is the moment you become untouchable, not because you fight better or harder, but because you no longer need to fight at all. You become the one who creates the game. You don't chase after someone else's moves like a pawn reacting blindly. Instead, you control the pace, the space, and the entire direction of the battle or life itself through stillness, through silence, and through the uncanny ability to turn every seeming disadvantage into a powerful strategic advantage. Machiavelli did not teach you to become ruthless in the shallow sense. He taught you to become unbreakable to the cheap tricks of emotion. He didn't teach you to dominate others, but to dominate the impatient ego within yourself. And when you rise above that game, when you no longer need to win to feel whole, when you no longer need to be liked to feel worthy, and when you no longer need to react to prove you exist, you are reborn. A new version of yourself emerges, stronger and far deeper than the person you once were. If you have made it this far, then you are no longer someone who is simply looking for tricks to win temporary battles. You are building a life that cannot be manipulated. This is a power no one can touch, a power that radiates from within, quiet, calm, and undeniable. There is no need for applause or noise to validate it. All you need is to know this. Everything you do is intentional. Every silence is an answer, and every step you take is your loudest statement. If this journey has resonated with you, leave a like to show your understanding. Share this with someone who needs a wake-up call, and don't forget to subscribe. Because what comes next will go deeper, darker, and far more awakening. The journey to mastering yourself has only just begun.